Hello everyone, this is part 12 of What If Deku Married Toga, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. The blue of the atmosphere is fractured, darkening as it splits into a cracked web. Lately, it's as though the sky has been falling. A non-reflective mirror as fragile as glass has shattered and everyone below is left to pick up the broken pieces. Also, that's how Scouchy feels as he stares upwards into the not-so-heavenly heavens. The detective opens a black umbrella, hoisting it over his head and blocking the view. Should any more shards rain down from above, he's hoping that the covering will be enough. From here on, he stares ahead. The police cruiser that he borrowed stays stationary, parked behind him. And he moves forward, even though he feels he's always looking back, going nowhere. Not only had the world lost one of its greatest heroes, if not the greatest hero ever, but Scouchy had lost his dearest friend. And the case he'd been too fixated on to set time aside for that friend still remains open. There's a lot of guilt weighing the detective down that he feels pulled back. But as Aizawa would say, there's still work to be done. Speaking of the underground hero, that's exactly who he's come to see. The case involving the Tokyo Ghoul has gotten out of hand, but they started it together, and that means they'll end it together no matter the grief it gives them. Scouchy's grip on the umbrella's handle tightens ever so slightly. He tells himself that it's in case the wind begins to pick up so that it doesn't fly away. He'd been kicking himself for giving the kid a chance all this time, but he can't imagine how Aizawa must be feeling. So when he knocks on the underground hero's door, he isn't expecting to see what's on the other side. Or rather, who he finds behind the veil. Is that Himiko Toga? His bewilderment leaves him slack-jawed for a few seconds. The League of Villains member sits on the floor of the underground hero's home, area across from her. The two girls have a set of coloring books between them, colored crayons scattering the carpet. Both of them pause their doodling to look at the newcomer and wave, but it's the blonde that greets him verbally, hello. And with the nerve to be casual about it no less. Yes, now that we've established that, get inside before someone else notices, Aizawa grabs Scouchy by the collar of his trademarked tan overcoat and pulls the detective inside. The underground hero slams the door shut behind them before letting go. Damn it, Aizawa. What's a villain doing in your house? Scouchy has trouble reining in his frustration and shock still. After all that has happened, this is the last thing he'd expect from the underground hero. He massages his forehead with his thumb and forefinger, trying to rub out the creases that are bound to become wrinkles. She's a valuable asset when it comes to finding Midoriya. Aizawa crosses his arms over his chest as though he's confident about what he's saying. However, Scouchy is sure he hears a hint of doubt in the statement. The detective folds his own arms to match Aizawa. Oh yeah. How so? His stare is skeptical, not so patiently waiting for the answer to the question. Aizawa looks away, unable to answer at first. All the people that he'd seek out are in one place, but eventually his gaze finds Himiko and Eri. The underground hero turns his eyes back to Scouchy, and as his face becomes somber, expression soft despite the rough stubble around his chin, the kid has nobody else. But Scouchy remains stone cold, setting his jaw. What makes you think Midoriya would come back to us? He asks the question bitterly. When the underground hero doesn't answer, the detective sighs. Face it, Aizawa. We F up. It's his turn to revert his gaze as the feeling of guilt returns. Aizawa stares down at the floor too, still having trouble finding the right response. I refuse to believe he can't still be saved. He eventually settles on a self-indulgent whisper. But after all that has occurred, all the lives that have been lost and the destruction left in the ghoul's wake, the reply from Aizawa only upsets Scouchy further. The detective reaches into his overcoat to dig out what he brought and originally came here to give the hero. Then maybe you should have a look at this. He shoves a book into Aizawa's arms. Aizawa falters, looking down at the novel. It's a hardcover. He bends it open to flip through some of the pages while asking, what's this? A lead. Scouchy prompts the hero to keep skimming the pages. They call themselves the Meta Liberation Army, and they're working with Midoriya. Turns out, Aogiri tree, is just a branch connecting to them. The connection between the Book of Propaganda and Tokyo Ghoul comes as a shock to Aizawa. How did you come by this? The underground hero glances up from the book to look into Scouchy's rectangular eyes. It's a pleading gaze, expressing Aizawa's desire to know more. Scouchy breaks eye contact. We've got someone on the inside, but the detective still discloses some of the inside information with a hushed tone. However, who? That only prompts Aizawa to dig deeper for answers. But he can only get so far. Scouchy glances around, appearing on the brink of paranoia. Not here. Not with her present, but his sights settle on Himiko and all is clear to Aizawa then. The underground hero relents. Fine. But this doesn't change the fact that she can be useful. He follows the detective's gaze to the pair of girls coloring together on the floor. We should arrest her, Scouchy grumbles just loud enough for Aizawa to hear him. And he doesn't once take his eyes off of the blonde villainess. She can be useful, Aizawa repeats himself with more insistence. Despite sounding so adamant, the hero doesn't get the detective to deter his laser focus on Himiko. She's K-people, Scouchy reminds Aizawa of the girl's crimes. There's an unspoken part of that reminder that correlates with Izuku Midoriya, who posed as Akutani Mikumo during his time as the Tokyo Ghoul. Give me a break, and the underground hero finally breaks. He shakes his head and throws his hands up in the air. Admit it. Neither of us know what we're doing. We're in over our heads. At this point, there's no wrong choices. Finally, Scouchy takes his gaze off of Himiko to assess Aizawa. Though, he doesn't turn his head fully. He side-eyes the underground hero, silently evaluating the emotional outburst that's a tad uncharacteristic. Sensing the investigation and plenitude of cases combining have taken their stressful toll, the detective humors the hero by asking, how exactly do you plan on putting her to good use? Aizawa stops short, clearly not having expected that question. After a moment, he hesitantly tries. You said you have somebody inside the Meta Liberation Army. Though that only prompts Scouchy to continue staring with expectations of elaboration. To a better than one, the underground hero gives a non-committable shrug as he provides his suggestion. What makes you think we can trust her? Scouchy raises a brow as he questions the proposition. He leans heavily to one side, planting his foot down. Who would Midoriya trust more than her? I'm sure they're both in dire need of a long-awaited reunion. Aizawa turns to face the detective fully. His own feet settle into place, his legs standing firm. Scouchy casts the underground hero a withering look. Aizawa, I can't even begin to list the number of reasons why that's a bad idea. First and foremost being because their emotions for one another could cause a conflict of interest. He voices his disapproval as delicately as he can, though, since the hero has clearly gotten so emotionally attached. Yoo-hoo, I'm literally right here, but Himiko herself interjects before Aizawa can begin to respond or Scouchy can continue. The fact that she may as well have been listening in on their conversation the entire time has them balking slightly. You're not even whispering, Himiko squints at him teasingly. Why did you think this was a good idea? Scouchy turns on Aizawa with a much lighter volume of voice. The hushed tone is slightly hoarse to keep conveying his aggravation though. You can't start now that I pointed it out, Himiko deadpans. Eri blinks in confusion, glancing between her sister role model and the adults. I told you, at this point, any idea is a good idea, but Aizawa ignores the blonde in favor of disputing with Scouchy. He too has lowered his voice to a quieter level. What happened to being logical? Scouchy snarks again while keeping the same angry whisper. He levels his gaze with Aizawa for added emphasis. You haven't exactly been showing the best judgment lately either, the underground hero responds with his own refute while maintaining eye contact. The staring starts shifting to a set of glares. What's that supposed to mean? Scouchy's face forces a frown as he his head incredulously. Wow, you two bicker more than an old married couple, Himiko chimes back in. She hadn't stopped eavesdropping, much more keen to listen in now more than ever. Not helping, Aizawa turns his glare from Scouchy to her in order to quiet her down. The blonde holds up her hands in a sign of mock surrender. When Aizawa returns his attention to Scouchy, the detective just shakes his head. Scouchy then jabs a harsh finger at the hero's chest. Look at the book. Stay in touch, before using it to switch aim from Aizawa to Himiko, and as for her. The blonde waves. Figure out what you're going to do. I'm not involved. Scouchy turns away with a slight flourish of his overcoat. Only after the detective has left and Aizawa is left contemplating with the book in his hands does Himiko speak up again. I think that went well. Aizawa casts her an unamused glance with a tired tilt of his head. But she's already back to playing with Eri, too occupied to notice. I need a cup of coffee, the underground hero sighs to himself before reopening the lead that Scouchy left him with. As for the person on the inside at the Meta Liberation Army, they just so happen to be making their introduction to the ghoul momentarily. Led there by Destro himself, the turncoat steals themselves for the meeting. The Tokyo ghoul has quite the reputation, after all. The ghoul snarls, turning to glare at whoever dares enter his den without knocking first. He finds Rikia Yotsubashi in the doorway, standing next to another familiar face. Red feathered wings and ash blonde hair that matches the yellow visor covering his eyes. The pro-hero known as Hawks has joined their ranks the same as Slid and Go betrayed the heroes. He can't say he's too pleased to be working with either of them if they're such frauds to heroism, but he also doesn't have much of a choice. He forces his sneer to morph into a more welcoming expression. The expression Hawks had throughout witnessing the whole mental breakdown stays on his face after seeing how quickly the ghoul changed his mood and behavior. I've met some crazy villains over the years, but you got to be the craziest one yet. He shakes his head in disbelief. Hawks has no idea how true that statement is. The tap of shoes treading tile echoes through the hall. A hall that's barely decorated, paintings only periodically giving some semblance of style or taste. The paintings aren't very artsy. There's no colored carpeting, no tasteful ceiling. Like above, the walls hold a dull pale coating of white paint. The recently recruited hero Hawks walks side by side with the Tokyo ghoul, venturing through the Meta Liberation Army compound, trying not to judge whoever coordinated design plans. With not much of a scenic sight to look at, Hawks breaks the equally boring silence with a glance over at the moody teen accompanying his trip, so. No glance or reply back from the kid. The hero tries not to take it too personally. I didn't expect you to be so young. He instead tries creating the conversation himself. Still nothing. They just continue walking. A few more seconds of the silent treatment and no hint of acknowledgement almost makes the hero lose hope in having a discussion. But eventually, the boy glances over and replies, "Don't you hold the record for the world's youngest hero?" Hawks lights up, ecstatic not just from receiving a response but also because of the mild trivia knowledge. Ah. A hero fanatic, huh? A grin finds itself on the hero's stubbled face as he tries teasing the kid a little, or just a fan of ME in particular. The boy shrugs, either unfazed by the playfulness or really good at hiding his embarrassment. He looks forward instead of at the hero, attention divided between the hall and the conversation. Pick your poison. His tone sounds as dull as the place looks, but Hawks still notes the mild humor hidden within. The hero chuckles, finding it funny how much attitude the kid has. With a shake of his head, Hawks spares another glance. The teen appears to be going through his gothic phase, trying out for Edgelord of the Year. Black leather adorns the boy's body, and his mask looks like something straight from a horror movie. And Hawks can't help but wonder what the deal is with the white hair. "You've got quite the personality," is all he manages to say about it all. The boy returns the glance, surprising Hawks. Especially since the eye he peers into doesn't look like any other. There's a deep dark dive of darkness, only accompanied by a single small orb of red. Shocking the hero even further, he doesn't quite understand what the boy means when he asks, "Which one?" "Huh." Hawks falters as he tries to shake off the strange feeling that he gets. He forces himself to break eye contact, trying to set his sights on what's ahead instead. Turns out that was a good idea. There's a set of oak doors that they're quickly approaching. Never mind, the Tokyo ghoul presses past the hero to push them open. "We're here," and announces what's on the other side as the intended destination of their travels within the facility. Hawks catches sight of a round table, chairs circling around it with some of those seats occupied. 6 people in total occupy the space. One of the group, short like the kid with a maroon cloak and floral scarf, springs up and runs towards them. Hawks braces for impact, tightening his muscles preemptively. But the person blurs past him and tackles the boy he came with instead. Or, well, tries to anyway. The kid barely budges, getting wrapped up in a hug as he stands there stoically. Ghoulie, a girlish squeal of delight comes from the cloaked bundle of bandages. Ghoulie doesn't return her cheerfulness though, trying to pry the short girl off of him. I told you not to invade my space, he chastises her with a tired tone that says this has happened enough to not come as a surprise to him. Hawks clears his throat, reminding the two that he's standing right next to them. Gaining their attention, he tries teasing, Ghoulie, again with a sly smirk. This your girlfriend? He asks. No, comes the immediate response from the boy. Though the girl just as quickly says, yes, overlapping and contradicting him. The two stare at one another, as though they're silently arguing over the answer, both as shocked by the other over their responses. After a brief moment, the boy sighs and introduces her. This is Eto. The girl waves. Eto, I'm sure you know Hawks, he gestures between the two of them to finish the formalities. Hiya, and Hawks returns the bubbly attitude with a friendly greeting of his own. He smiles and waves, returning the favor. If the girl is indeed the boy's girlfriend, then he guesses it's true what they say, opposites do attract. Would it hurt if I plucked out your feathers? Eto tilts her head as though the spontaneous question is one from childlike innocence. Hawks raises a brow, starting to reevaluate his earlier thought, understanding why and how two villains would be attracted to one another in other ways. A little bit, he answers her honestly while forcing a smile to stay on his face. He figures it's probably best to be polite considering he's outnumbered and there's no telling what they can do. The bandages around Eto's mouth furrow a bit, indicating that she's smiling back at him. Good to know, her cheery tone suddenly sounds a lot more malicious than it previously did. Hawks feels a nervous bead of sweat rolling down his forehead. Quickly, he wipes it away by running his hand up and over through his hair, subtly hiding the potential sign of weakness. Charming, he has to maintain the charade that he's been putting on. The sound of heels clicking against tile announces the arrival of another person coming to introduce herself. A blue-skinned woman tosses her lilac hair over her shoulder, but not as dashing as you, Hawks. The hero knows that out of everyone here, she certainly had nothing to do with the building's poor decoration, considering her sense of style is rather formal. A shoulderless black dress contrasts a salmon-toned jacket in a fashionable way. I would love to interview you sometime. And find out what makes you tick, though the way she talks like the other femme fatale reminds him quickly of how she's a villainess. This is Cheetos. She's overzealously curious, so she may come across as forward at times. The Tokyo Ghoul continues serving as a mediator and unenthusiastically introduces the woman to the hero. He's lost his flourish despite never having had any to begin with, throwing up his hand and letting it drop with a haphazard gesture. Guilty, Cheetos shrugs with some over-exaggeration. Her lips raise into a smile that comes across as anything but kindly. Charmed, Hawks takes her hand and the backside of it to show some chivalry anyways. He also figures he may as well indulge a little in his performance for the villains. Speaking of the others, the Tokyo Ghoul gestures broadly at the ones who didn't bother to stand up and introduce themselves. And the rest are Getten, Tatara, Noro, and Dabi. The last one at least acknowledges the hero with a small nod. They're less rowdy than the females. The ghoul provides an excuse on their behalf for the lack of a warm welcome. Considering the glares that Hawks is receiving from the majority of them though, and his previous experiences with the others, he can't say he doesn't mind. So this is Aogiri, he takes in the group with a sweep of the room. All of them seem dangerously deadly. We're one big happy family tree. Eto returns to her seat with a light plop. She props her feet up on the table, leaning back and lounging with her arms tucked behind her hooded head. Clearly, Dabi scoffs and rolls his eyes after making a sarcastic comment. It doesn't seem that he agrees with Eto's sentiment. She sits up, taking her legs off the table and moving her arms to cross over her chest, pouting. Redestro saw it fit to put you with us considering this subdivision was created fairly recently. The Tokyo Ghoul snaps Hawk's attention back to him as he passes by and elaborates more on the group in technical terms. The hero watches the boy take a seat at the head of the table, D-center and across from him. So what you're saying is that this is where they stick the newbies. Hawks grabs his own chair since everyone else is getting comfortable. He may as well settle in for the long haul, since this is beginning to look like it'll take a while. The ghoul shrugs. Considering I'm the founder and a newbie, myself, that sounds appropriately correct, and seems pleased when his revelation that he's Aogiri's leader surprises Hawks. The hero is once again struck by how somebody so young could embed themselves within the underworld of villains so deeply. He's especially shocked by how the boy managed to gain such a high position of power. Tell me more, He leans forward a little to properly hear all the details. And they call me curious. Cheetos laughs at her own joke from across the table. Hawks has half a mind to force a chuckle but is relieved that he doesn't have to when nobody else does. Oh, can I be the one to tell him? Can I? Eto jumps up with her hand raised over her head. With her arm outstretched as high as it can go, she wiggles in place full of eagerness to speak. Suddenly, one of the silent members decides it's time to speak up. He's as composed and as stoic as his leader, with just as much of a commanding gait to how he stands up so effortlessly proud. We don't know if he can be trusted completely just yet. Tatara speaks through his red mouthpiece but his voice doesn't come out muffled at all. The words weigh heavily on Hawks. He's got a point. Dabi casts Hawks a suspicious sidelong stare while considering Tatara's input. But their leader holds up a hand to silence them, as well as preventing anybody else from chiming in. Tatara sits back down, as well as Eto. Hawks is surprised by how the kid can command such respect from the bunch. You should already know about our cause thanks to our publisher, and he finds himself giving the boy his full undivided attention. That is, until the ghoul nods towards Eto. I'm the author. Eto expresses her pride with a display of what looks like jazz hands. The hero isn't all that stunned to see a book placed on the table in front of him. He's seen it before. He knows about the secret messages encoded inside. Though he is amazed by how, yet again, someone so young can make such an impact. I gave Ghoulie a signed copy. Eto leans her head on a propped hand to stare fondly in the ghoul's direction. You like to read? Hawks turns his gaze towards the ghoul too with a hint of amusement. He isn't done trying to successfully tease the boy just yet. Plus, the joking around helps ease the tension and quell his anxiety about being undercover. Don't you? The ghoul stares back with still no reaction to the playfulness. Not so much. Hawks shrugs before opening up the book in front of him. He doesn't actually read anything on the pages as he flips through. I did get the gist of the agenda though. You follow the philosophy that there should be a free usage of quirks as a basic human right. Pretty noble stuff. Some wouldn't think so. Getten also finally breaks his silence to chime in. White eyes glow from within the shadows casted by the hood concealing his face. Hawks doesn't bother staring into the orbs for too long. Well, you do emphasize liberation over regulation. The hero tries defending those who oppose the Meta-Liberation Army's beliefs. Part of him is hoping he may be able to appeal to the group. Or, at least, to their leader. He is just a kid, after all. We can't change what quirks we were born with. Designating people as villains over something they can't control is pitiful. Not to mention how heroes are kept in action due to prohibiting quirk usage. Do you think heroes would be all that needed if civilians were allowed to use their quirks in order to defend themselves? But the ghoul's response on behalf of Getten and the rest of Aogiri doesn't leave much room for argument if his tone is anything to go by. Hawks catches Dabi's gaze. The villain covered in burns looks away, piquing the hero's interest a little. But he lets it slide. He turns his attention back to the ghoul and nods, all valid points. But what are you going to do about it? Something is better than sitting around and doing nothing. The ghoul flicks his hand as though he's brushing the question away. He's disinterested in answering. Or maybe, he's hiding his true intentions. But Hawks won't let it go that easily. So young and you've already got it all figured out. He hopes that goading the kid will get him to slip up. The hero prays that his risky move gets answers instead of getting him K. You sound as though you don't sympathize nor empathize with our cause, but Getten is the one who takes the bait. The villain's tone is ice cold, accusation a frosty bitter bite. I didn't say that. Hawks holds up his hands in a placating gesture. He waits for the attitude to de-escalate before continuing. I'm just shocked by your leader is all, seeing that nerves are high-strung amongst the group now but the ghoul still hasn't fallen for the emotional trap. Hawks takes the full plunge into his, and I'm still wondering what the plan is. Nobody says anything aloud, only speaking to each other through quick glances. But eventually, Tatara and the Tokyo ghoul come to some sort of unspoken agreement. We're going to declare war. The Aogiri leader finally reveals their agenda. War. In the streets, though the implications of high-staked conflict only provokes more questions to spawn in the hero's mind. First and foremost, he's concerned about where the conflict will be taking place. Tatara narrows his eyes, squinting at the hero with a look of irritation. The battleground is yet to be chosen. his answer about the location sounds like a bold-faced lie. But Hawks knows better than to dispute it with how much tension he's already caused there to be in the room. That's the plan. Charge into battle and hope we win. He instead opts for a different approach to gaining information. Any amount of intel is worth knowing, like what sort of strategy Aogiri has in mind or what kind of plan of attack they may use. There's a bit more to it than that. But that's all you need to know, but Getten is still giving him the cold shoulder. The villain makes it crystal clear that Hawks still has to earn their trust before knowing more. Hawks relents, much to his disappointment. Right, I'm the new guy. Almost forgot, he tries not to sulk too much as he accepts that he won't be learning anything else that's useful. No offense, Eto contrasts his mood with a cheery interjection from across the table. And he can't help but accept the gesture to get back in everyone's good graces. None taken, he forces a smile to show them all that he harbors no hard feelings. The Tokyo Ghoul abruptly gets up, chair legs screeching against the floor's tile. If we're done here, he hastily moves to leave but Dabi stands up to block his path. The ghoul looks annoyed by the obstruction but Dabi doesn't back down. You're excusing yourself. Dabi looks concerned for the boy's well-being but keeps his distance. Hawks notes the dynamic, finding their relationship interesting. Then again, everyone appears startled by their leader's sudden decision to leave. Even Noro with his silence, possibly mute Hawks theorizes, and his full face covering. I have another headache, the ghoul clutches the side of his head. He digs his dark fingernails into his contrasting bright hair. He appears anxious now, desperate to leave the room. Wordlessly, Dabi accepts the reasoning and steps aside. But before the ghoul can make it out of the room without any other interruptions, Eto chases after him. She tries grasping onto his arm but he shakes her off. Think I can make it better for you, she tries calling after him with her best attempt at what sounds like a seductive tone. But he doesn't stop his stride towards the exit nor does he bother looking back. You just make it worse, the ghoul growls under his breath as his walk becomes a stagger. Unbeknownst to his team, he feels like there's more crawling around in his head than his thoughts. Let him rest. Tatara prevents Eto from following by waving her back over to the table. There's still things we can discuss without him, and Hawk's own momentary concern is forgotten for the time being. His priority as an undercover hero to gather intel and having the potential to discover more about the villain group's operation has him returning his attention to the villains at the table. Besides, there's not much Hawks or any of Aogiri can do for the ghoul as he staggers into the restroom. He's away from prying eyes and ears but that doesn't relieve his suffering. The throbbing in the boy's skull has him banging it against the door. Just in case anybody hears the commotion, he turns the latch and locks it. There's so much sweat coming from him that his dampened hair is starting to cling to his skin. The ghoul stumbles, catching himself on the sink. He leans on the bathroom appliance, using it as a crutch. It's hard to breathe. He rips the leather mask off of his face and discards it for the time being. Strong intakes of air has him panting heavily. His chest heaves in and out. He closes his eyes and focuses on the oxygen he swallows. And only after he's got his breathing under control does he raise his head to have a look at himself in the mirror. His reflection doesn't match his physical appearance. Not entirely. A wide-eyed boy stares with his mouth agape, green hair matted down the same as the ghoul's snow-white locks. The eyes of the reflection are also an emerald color. Not like the ghoul's dark chasms with contrasting crimson at their center. When he tilts his head one way, his mirror self turns it the other. Suddenly, a burning sensation floods the left field of his vision. He cries out as the searing strike stabs through his eye, reflexively grabbing at his face and rubbing around the edges. The ghoul catches a glimpse of himself in the mirror again with his remaining good eye. He sees what has happened. One eye is his and the other no longer has the Kakugan state active. Panicking, the ghoul scrambles for his mask and pulls it back on. The eye patch plugs the leak. He looks at himself in the mirror again, willing his reflection to show himself. It does. And faintly, he forgets his own name. He's not the boy he saw. That was Izuku Midoriya. The scrambling of his mind has ceased for him to not care anymore. The ghoul unlocks the door and exits the restroom. He finds Destro waiting for him outside. Are you alright? The head of the Meta Liberation Army raises a brow. I'm fine, the ghoul hisses with frustration. After snapping, he reins in his anger and tries to ask coolly, what is it? I was just wondering if you informed him about your plan to infiltrate Tartarus yet, and Redestro doesn't dwell on his well-being much to the ghoul's relief. Redestro instead focuses on the objective the ghoul had come to the villain organization's leader about in the first place. No, he shakes his head in denial. I'm saving that for the day of, because not even Redestro knows about the true purpose of infiltrating the prison. The Meta Liberation Army leader believes it's to break out members of his cause to have more numbers in the upcoming war. But in reality, he wants to reach all for one. Aizawa is disquietingly aware of the security system Nezu has in place at UA. What should bring solace in light of recent events now hangs heavily over his head like a guillotine. Since despite being a teacher at the educational institution, he has no validation for entering Chio's office currently. The nurse's medical supplies glint under the fluorescent light of the room when he flicks the switch to the bulbs. The underground hero has no doubt Nezu will review the camera footage if he's not currently watching them live, the principal always acutely conscious of things. He's bound to be caught and questioned if not immediately. And yet, he commits to why he's risking entering the medbay. A large metal cabinet that appears to be for filing records at first glance resides at the back of the room. Aizawa knows better, having contributed to the container's contents himself. Nezu wondering why the teacher has entered the nurse's station unscheduled is one thing, but the principal will be beyond wonderment when he sees what Aizawa takes unentered. Using Chio's spare key that she keeps hidden under the plant she leaves on the windowsill, the underground hero unlocks the cupboard. Vials glisten when exposed to the room's light, plastic bags as equally radiant. The bright red liquid within reacts to the illumination akin to when the sun hits water, almost aglow. B-bags and DNA samples stowed away in case of an emergency. Should somebody require a transfusion or anything along those lines, the school is more than prepared. They're labeled. The names of donors, B-types, student and teacher IDs, all the fixings are written out for convenience and safety. The practicality of Chio's organization is part of why Aizawa and the healing heroine had gotten along so well over the years. It's also a saving grace of time and trouble for him to select whose bee he came for in particular. Aizawa slides a tube from its rack, handling it carefully so that it doesn't break. Once the vial is pocketed in one of the compartments around the waist of his hero uniform, Aizawa closes the cabinet and leaves. Again, Gran Torino snaps at Toga angrily. Relentlessly, the two have been training non-stop like this. The elder hero's yellow cape flaps through the air, trailing behind him as he propels himself at extreme speeds. Toga has time to barely react, Gran Torino moving within the blink of an eye. After All Might's fall, Toga has no choice but to push himself beyond his limits. No longer can he wait to replace the symbol of peace. There's no time to prepare anymore. He has to be strong enough to stand as tall and firm as All Might now more than ever. It's his duty after having one for all passed on to him. Under the tutelage of Gran Torino, Toga plans to save over 1 million lives. And to stop just as many villains. Gran Torino rockets from one end of the room to the other. The old man is more than spry for his age, curving through the air like a bullet. Toga tries to track the movement as best as he can, straining his eyes. He saw the way that the Tokyo Ghoul moved on television. The centipede-like limbs alone match Gran Torino's speed. If Toga wants to be Lemurian and bring the villain to justice, then he needs to become just as fast. The muscular blonde yells as he gives it his all, reaching out to grab his opponent mid-air. Toga had hoped to snatch Gran Torino in the middle of momentum. Instead, he grabs a fistful of nothing. He already knows what his trainer is going to say before he hears it. Again. A thick layer of glass, polymethylmethacrylate, separates spectators from the intensive training. The clear barrier is the same type of material used in aquariums or zoos. Behind them, a third person arrives to join in. Light footfalls echo and alert Tamaki and Neja. All Might's sidekick, Sir Naiteye, steps in between the two to get a close look. He's still going. The hero keeps his gaze fixed on Toga's training despite addressing the two people at either side of him. He hasn't stopped once. Tamaki grimaces in sympathy of his friend's pain. Neja walks around Sir Naiteye to place a hand on his shoulder in consolation. Witnessing the strain Toga is going through for himself, Naiteye hums in contemplation. After a moment of consideration, the hero raps on the glass to get everyone's attention. Gran Torino stops beating the hell out of his student long enough for Naitei to then enter the room and speak. That's enough. His declaration earns scowls from both Togator and Torino. I can keep going, Togator tries arguing. Though Naitei can see the way the boy's body shudders as it tries desperately to remain standing. He hasn't achieved his goal for today just yet. Gran Torino folds his arms across his chest with a shake of his head. He still hasn't caught me. Sorahiko. I said enough. Naitei glowers at the senior through the lens of his glasses. Gran Torino is about to glare back, but he finally notices Togator's current worn-down state. The old man huffs before walking off. Naitei returns his attention to Togator. Hit the showers and get dressed. The Hero Committee is about to announce Endeavor as the new number 1. The change to the Billboard chart is being given a huge presentation. Within a stadium, heroes will be taking to a stage for the first time at one of these events to boost morale. Reporters join a crowd of cheering fans as music hypes up the reveal. Whoever isn't attending the event in person is watching it through a live feed. The world waits to see what a hero listing without All Might will look like. Ranking at number 10, Ryukyu takes the stage. She waves nervously as the crowd goes wild, applauding and whistling in support. She's followed by number 9, a hero clad in samurai armor, Yoroimusha. And then number 8, a washing machine. The crowd's cheers diminish a little at that one. Kamui Woods and Crust rejuvenates the awe factor immediately after though. Whoops and hollers only get louder when Mirko and Edgeshot join the stage. Backstage, preparing for his turn when his announcement as number 2 comes, Hawks paces impatiently. He's not fretting over the wait until his shining moment of stardom though. He's stressing over the absence of the heroes he's supposed to meet before going on stage. Sir Naitei had arranged with him beforehand a brief rendezvous, saying the underground hero Eraserhead and a detective would also be there. Thankfully, Naitei remains true to his word. The hero arrives, along with a few extras he hadn't mentioned would be part of the meetup. Cutting it a little close, aren't you? Hawks tries funneling his nerves through a comedic filter to calm himself down. You're the one who wanted to do this here and now instead of at Naitei's agency. The detective doesn't appear to be in the best of moods to joke around though. Hawks can see from the lack of shaving and eye bags that the officer must be working around the clock just as him. Actually, that was at my discretion. We can't risk spies or prying eyes and ears in any place too public. Naitei comes to his fellow hero's rescue by taking the heat of the detective. But he's not just a scapegoat. He truly did arrange for the intel delivery to be here of all places. And yet, you chose the most public places of them all. Eraserhead holds a dry tone but his slightly raised eyebrows are inquisitive. Hawks figures he'll return the favor and cover for Naitei this time. Exactly. It's too combust and full of heroes with a high security detail to boot for the villains to watch or listen in. This is my one opportunity to share with you the intel that I've learned. He knows full well the strategy behind picking such a peculiar time and location. So spill it, one of the unmentioned attendees chimes in. A spiky-haired blonde in a UA uniform standing beside Eraserhead. A prospective hero attending the school most likely. Who's the kid? But Hawks questions the boy's presence anyways. He's likely a first year. Second year at best. Not like the much bulkier blonde beside Naitei. He has a connection to a person of interest. Don't pay him any mind, but Eraserhead brushes off the matter as no big deal. As a matter of fact, he looks keen to change the subject as soon as possible. Okay. Hawks refrains from prying though. He figures the underground hero could just be concerned that they'll run out of time before intel can be shared. Aogiri is a subset of the Meta Liberation Army just like we thought. And they're planning something big. Hawks starts talking out of his own concerns over being pressed for time. How big? The detective plucks a notepad from his coat pocket to write stuff down. Hawks waits for the officer to flip to a blank page before replying. A war. The hero tries gauging everyone's reaction as he conveys the most dire of revelations. As expected, they range from surprise to worry. When? Where? But the detective recovers quick enough to ask more questions for his notes. Already, he's jotting something down. I don't have high enough clearance to know that yet. Hawks shakes his head with a disappointed sigh. But listen to what I do know. The one leading Aogiri is the Tokyo Ghoul. He moves on to the next big piece of information instead. He's leading them. which seems even more shocking to Eraserhead than the prospect of a war. Hawks stares sidelongingly at the underground hero, sensing a deeper connection to that part of the investigation. Perhaps the mystery of the UA student has been solved as well. What do you know about him, especially since the blonde boy jumps at the mention of the Tokyo Ghoul like a dog on a bone? Bakugo, Eraserhead catches the boy by the crook of his arm to stop him. There's an exchange of glares between them, something unspoken. But before anyone can say anything more, the speaker system announces that their meeting is over. And now, introducing number 2. Hawks. The stadium roars behind the curtains to the stage as Hawks is called out. The hero winces, not wanting to leave. But he doesn't have a choice. Sorry. That's my cue. Hawks hopes what he's left them with will be enough before walking into a sea of adoring fans. This isn't over. Naiteye is the first to speak once Hawks is gone. He adjusts his glasses before casting a look towards Scouchy. See what you can uncover about this war. I'm assuming they'll need to arm themselves if they're not gathering numbers. You can leave that to me, but Eraserhead steps forth to turn the attention towards him instead. As an underground hero, he knows full well how to operate the underworld to gather information. I'll hit the usual spots. Any potential leads are usually funneled through particular places that became common habitat for criminal S, and it's better not to scare them away with a cop snooping around. I'll try finding the ghoul then. Scouchy narrows his eyes at the underground hero. Neither of them are bound to have any luck considering they had difficulty at the start of the investigation, but he had expected Aizawa to jump at the opportunity to find his problem child. Naiteye places a hand on the strong shoulder of the burly blonde he brought with him, steering the boy away. I will continue preparing Mirio and the others at my agency for the inevitable battle then. He sounds as stressed as everyone there but keeps a stoic gait as he escorts the future hero. There's a lot on his shoulders too, with nobody placing a consoling hand on either one. Aizawa walks away with his own aspiring hero. Or, so the boy had seemed to be. Once the two find themselves a private corner, Bakugo's face begins to partially melt away. Grey goop uncovers a feminine voice beneath. Himiko Toga's quirk had camouflaged her using the blood that the underground hero took from UA's medical supply. Now what? She asks. The underground hero raises a brow as though the question makes no sense. Didn't you hear me? We're going to investigate some arms dealings. He's finally found a use for the girl with a criminal background. The headset fits snug around his ears, not like the underground hero's goggle straps that chafes the skin. As much as he hates sitting on the sidelines, he has to admit that the alternative is better in this case. Eraserhead listens through the wire that Himiko Toga is wearing beneath her clothes as she saunters into a black market for weapons. She goes unsuspected of anything and he doesn't have to lift a finger. The known criminal blends into her environment, stopping by a few knife stands to seem natural. But she and the underground hero both know that the Meta Liberation Army will be using gear much deadlier than blades. He listens closely as she finally tries the first of many post-selling firearms. The blonde villainess approaches a cephalopodic man. The fellow criminal's head resembles the mantle of an octopus, tentacles with suction cups hanging down from his face. A red hood that matches the villain's papillae-covered skin covers his eyes. Himiko tries to make the gazes meet despite the covering. A harpoon gun. Something pointy like a knife that can be shot. Tempting, she pretends to be interested in one of the weapons being sold to further rein in the seller's attention. 6,000, the vendor does reply but still doesn't bother to lift his gaze. The price is also double the cost of what a legal sale would cost. Not cheap. Himiko's expression must convey her thoughts because the villain adds, not negotiable. Take it or leave it. Himiko holds up her index finger, wagging it back and forth while tutting. I didn't say I was gonna buy it. I said it was tempting to buy. She flashes her pointed canines with a wide grin. But the arms dealer doesn't smile back. Then don't waste my time. He waves a hand to shoo her away like some pesky brat he doesn't want distracting him. Don't be like that. Himiko tries not to sound like she's whining too much to avoid that brat label but still doesn't give up. She casually browses the broader selection of weapons. I'm sure there's something here you can convince me to bring home. Her eyes roam the crates containing explosives. Most people already know what they're looking for, but the gun merchant isn't convinced by her act just yet. Beneath the hood that shields his eyes, he watches Himiko with a critical gaze. Himiko pretends she doesn't notice the judgmental stare. What about the ones who don't? She keeps hoping that her nonchalant attitude will sway him. They don't exist, but the salesman doesn't fold easily. Suddenly, Himiko's own earpiece buzzes to life. Hers is much smaller, meant to go unnoticed. Made more for espionage than comfort. Steer him on topic, Eraserhead tries helping her direct her conversation in the right direction. Himiko covers her mouth with the crook of her arm, pretending to sneeze. I'm getting there, she uses that brief moment to whisper her response to the underground hero. When she lowers her arm and redirects her attention to the villain, she asks, "Do you sell in stock to anyone?" That gets the arms dealer to look up at her. Only when there's a large group, he glances around as though searching for someone standing behind her. When confirming that she's by herself, he asks, "You representing someone, girly?" "Now's your chance," Eraserhead's voice buzzes in her ear again. "Unless one of my associates already came by," Himiko shrugs to act as though it's not such a big deal. Now that she's got his attention, she switches tactics to seem disinterested. "I'm with the Meta Liberation Army," and hopes her lie works. "Can't say they have," the weapons seller strokes one of his tentacles like it's part of a beard. Hook, line, and sinker. The anthropomorphic octopus has been caught. Too bad not dealing with the Meta Liberation Army means he's useless to them. Still, the arms dealer tries to be polite now in order to win her over. "Perhaps I should have introduced myself sooner. I'm Innsmouth. How can I be of service to you?" On second thought, I'm gonna try looking around some more. Himiko backs away into the crowd of other criminals mingling the market. Innsmouth doesn't even get the chance to stop her before she slips into the sea of villains. Smooth, Eraserhead didn't have to see her vanishing act to know she abruptly ended the conversation with Innsmouth. His tone is a balance between being impressed and disapproval of her actions. It was a dead end. "I wasn't gonna stand around wasting time," Himiko mutters under her breath so nobody but he can hear her. She weaves in and out between other people roaming the area. You can't go checking every stand either. Not only is there too many, but that'd be bound to raise suspicion. The underground chastising her earns an eye roll from the blonde. It's not like he can see her do it. "I'm not hearing any better ideas," Himiko grumbles. Under ordinary circumstances, if he were in front of her, he probably wouldn't be able to hear the comment, but the comlink is close enough to her mouth to pick up her voice. Eraserhead hums as he considers the truth behind her remark. It takes him but a moment to make a suggestion. "We could take turns. Going in shifts might work." He considers swapping between the two of them to avoid getting caught. But Himiko has paused in the middle of the market with something else on her mind. "Hey, that's the 10th time I saw a gun stand with one of those cases." She notices that there's a common container with each vendor, which also catches Eraserhead's interest. Must be a third-party seller. "I doubt everyone there stole from the same place." He hopes it's a lead and asks, "Does the box say anything?" Himiko tries to get closer to read the kanji without squinting. Detonate, the logo and text belongs to a company. A familiar one. The same enterprise selling books that promote the Meta Liberation Army's cause. They never needed illegal weapons. They had them in stock already. Eraserhead realizes the business must have warehouses full of firearms. They're arming their troops already. He's already hurrying to meet Himiko at their rendezvous point. For what? The blonde begins moving at a brisker pace to get there as well. She glances at each vendor as she passes them. The stands are crowded. She already knows the answer. It's to build an army. And at the forefront of that army, Aogiri gathers for another meeting. Hawk strolls into the room to find everyone else waiting for him. All eyes land on him when he comes through the door. He can even feel Noro's stare through the villain's creepy mask. "Am I interrupting something?" Hawks tries to break the tension with a forced smile. Not at all. He's only partially relieved when Curious is the only one to return the gesture. How goes moonlighting as a hero? Her own day job interviewing people gets the better of her. Business as usual. Hawks thinks back to his quick meeting with Naiteye and the others before shrugging off the question and trying to throw it back at him. "What about you all? Any off hours?" "I play online Go sometimes." Eto is the only one to indulge the hero. She earns a few looks, some of them glares. "What?" She shrinks in on herself until all that's left is embarrassment. "Never a break here." Getten responds coldly to the question. "And the same should go for you if you're devoted to our cause." he's still clearly not warmed up to the turncoat hero just yet. Hey, I've got a public opinion to maintain. Cut me some slack. Hawks holds his hands up in a placating manner while trying to defend himself for being tardy. He can only hope that they aren't suspicious of him, his paranoia getting the better of him. Typical hero, for ya, Dabi mumbles under his breath as he crosses his arms. He still advocates for Stain's cause more than the Meta Liberation Armies. But the Tokyo Ghoul puts a stop to the discussion, standing up. Hawks is right. His reputation is important to us. It'd be foolhardy to throw it all away. The hero is relieved that their leader speaks in his defense. I agree. As much as I hate to admit it, Hawks is even more surprised when Tatara also backs him up. Though the Algiri subordinate could just be going along with what the ghoul is saying. Forget it. We shouldn't waste time on this crap, Getten growls as he waves a hand to push the matter aside. He's agitated more than usual, already fed up with the group's conversation. Jack Frost here has a point, and Dabi doesn't help to quell that anger. The nickname earns a glare from Getten. Can you tell us why you called this meeting already? But Dabi doesn't seem to notice or care. Sorry that it's on such short notice. The ghoul nods in understanding of everybody's frustration though. Hawks shudders when the ghoul's gaze meets his. But I'm left no choice other than to take such precautions, especially when he hears the next sentence out of the Algiri leader's mouth. And here I thought we were beginning to bond. Hawks sighs as he realizes it's going to be a lot harder than he initially imagined to gather information for a counterattack. Ooh, we can always do trust fall exercises. Eto hops up with a raised hand as she tries to make a suggestion. Though Dabi is quick to oppose the idea, I am not trusting any of you whack jobs to catch me. Takes one to know one. Getten glances at the fire user with disdain in his eyes. Dabi returns the glare and holds it a while longer. That's enough, you two. Tatara stands up to maintain order. He matches the ghoul's aura, even his white hair a similarity of its own to the Algiri leader. Once the group is quieted down, their boss clears his throat and begins again. As I was saying, they flinch when they hear his own agitation leaking through. In preparation for the upcoming war, we have ourselves a side mission, but Hawks is put even more on edge. The sudden announcement of a detour worries the hero. Especially when what looks like a warp gate opens up. If you'd follow me, the ghoul confirms the portal is indeed a means of transportation by stepping into it. I love surprises. How fun. Eto charges after him without a hint of hesitation. Though the others are just as apprehensive as the hero. Wishing to win him over, Hawks follows after Eto, hoping that proves something to the group of villains. I hate surprises, Dabi grumbles in complaint. Though his protest falls on deaf ears, the others already following Hawk's lead. Dabi disappointedly goes with them. Greetings everyone, he's shocked to see a familiar face on the other side. A wisp of purple smoke, the culprit for the warp gate. A fellow former member of the League of Villains that Dabi had believed to be D. But what's far more disturbing, is the scenery of where they've all been relocated. All of Algiri turned towards their leader for answers. Most people would expect someone to break out of this place. Well, Algiri, we'll be breaking in. The Tokyo Ghoul only prompts them to continue looking around. The environment is merely but a threshold to an even worse place. Oh, it's you again. Eto seems to be the only one unbothered by the view. She instead fixates on the warper. What the hell is Kurogiri doing here? For which Dabi is grateful since he's able to momentarily forget about where he's been dropped off. Only momentarily though. His eyes are drawn back to the colossal castle buried in the depths of the ocean. What even is this place? I'm sure you're used to the flames. The Tokyo Ghoul chuckles as though he just made a joke. He trudges through the mud and towards the cliff that stretches out towards the structure ahead. The deepest region of hell is where we're headed, and he announces their destination. Only Hawks is able to recognize it, his dread at their sudden drop-off enhanced tenfold. Tartarus, he exhales as though he'd been holding his breath under the monsoon all this time. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.